You were in finance for many years. You have a good understanding of it. Tomorrow, I'm going to be on Truthwire with Fiorella, and Gerald Salente will be there. So we're going to dive into, we're going to get two, ladies and gentlemen, to get ready for this, two crash courses on exactly what tariffs are, how they can be used, talking about McKinley. I think Gerald Salente says he was for some of the tariffs, right? Stating that McKinley used to say, what do you want, cheaper products or higher wages, right? And that gives you the mindset that tariffs are supposed to be used to strengthen the workforce here, to have some homegrown products in which we can't take advantage of slave labor in other countries, but they're made here. So we have to pay a few extra bucks, but that provides jobs to people and security to people. The way I'm looking at it, I don't think you can see it right here. It's the new tariff in town. Can you see it?
Yeah.
There's a new tariff in town. And also I have the Wall Street Journal over there talking about the back and forth between Claudia Sheinbaum and Donald Trump as far as tariffs are concerned. Today we heard the term reciprocal tariffs come out of Donald Trump. I had to end the show as he was having a press conference and talking about it. He had his henchman from what's the name of the company? The guy who was Howard Lutnick was with him, his economic guys.
Yeah.
To me, it seems like Donald Trump is using tariffs as more of a weapon, right? Is more of a saying, hey, Claudia Sheinbaum of Mexico, hey, Xiomara Castro of Honduras, hey, Xi Jinping of China, hey, Justin Trudeau of Canada, whoever else is running that clown show over there. If you don't do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to hit you with a tariff. And once you behave, I'll take the tariff away. And guess what? If you don't behave, I'll double the tariff. It doesn't seem to me to have the same mindset of like, we want to strengthen the workforce here in the United States, something that Donald Trump is not at fault for, right? He didn't sign NAFTA. He wasn't part of the Clinton-Reagan regime when everybody wants to brag about Reagan and the regime, that this libertarian mindset that you just completely deregulate everything and let the market work itself out. Yeah, let's have a football game and take out the referees, see how that works. Donald Trump's not at fault for that, but he's trying to present the solution, and now he seems to be kind of using the mechanism that was supposed to strengthen the workforce as more of a sanction and as a punishment tool to get these countries to change their behavior. Give us a little insight about what the tariffs are, what he was talking about, reciprocal tariffs. Could they be a good thing or a bad thing? Because now the argument is out there that these things are bad, that the tariff will be passed on to the actual consumer, meaning we, the people. Give us a little insight about tariffs and how what this is shaping up to be and how Donald Trump is using the tariff game to his advantage or disadvantage.
Okay. I'm going to just put a caveat at the head end of this.
Please.
When we try to predict behavior of systems in response to an individual stimulus or change, we look to the history of that system having encountered this particular phenomenon before, and use that as sort of a guide to help us predict what's going to happen again. Tariffs are a tax that's levied on goods primarily, but goods and services that cross the border.
For what purpose, though?
Well, that's the purpose of a tax. It's to generate revenue. Prior to the early 20th century, in other words, prior to early 1900s, the bulk of revenue for the federal government here came not from income taxes or estate taxes, inheritance taxes, but rather from tariffs.
When was this again, Don?
Prior to the beginning of the 20th century.
Gotcha.
So from 1776 or 1789 or whatever beginning point you use for the U.S. government, the Continental Congress or whatever, up until the early 20th century, the bulk of the revenue into the federal government came from taxing imports.
Got it.
And the purpose of that was, multifold. One was just the raw revenue purpose. You wake up in the morning on January 1st of 1790, and you have a need of revenue to buy guns and pay people to build roads or whatever the hell else they saw as the tasks in front of them at that point in time. and you look at what's available as a source of revenue, and you see that there's a trade that goes on. There's things that we have to buy from elsewhere because we don't make them ourselves, or we don't make them ourselves yet. And then, so these are things that could be, revenue. People have to buy, I don't know, whips for buggy whips.
Yep.
And so they only make those in England or whatever. They're starting to build them in Massachusetts, but right now we import them from England. They go for $1. People are willing to pay $1.25 for them. Let's levy a 25-cent import fee on it, a tariff, and use that 25 cents for revenue into the federal government. This evolved over 120 years or whatever into a rather sophisticated device that was used both to fund the government and also to help establish industrial policy in the United States, to mitigate competition of extraterritorial businesses, foreign businesses, against American producers in the American market. So if I have a buggy whip that I'm making in Massachusetts, and the English buggy whip company has one that they're making in London, and they can undersell me because they've got a bigger factory, or their workers will work for less, or whatever. I'm the president or the Congress, and we jack the price of the imported one so that it's on par or maybe even more expensive than the domestic one. So now someone going shopping for a buggy whip is going to find buying the one from Massachusetts more attractive, and this in turn will help that Massachusetts buggy whip company expand and grow and thrive, et cetera, et cetera. And then the suppliers to the buggy whip company, whoever slaughters the cattle that sells them the leather or whatever they're made out of, or mines the copper or whatever, will also have more business. That was what was done for the first 100.
Would you agree with the statement that a lot of times that these, and this is what was sold from Donald Trump, we're going to use tariffs to level the playing field? In other words, if you watched Shark Tank and somebody comes on Shark Tank to ask for millions of dollars, and they start asking, what's it cost you to make this? And like, it cost me $4.95. Where do you make it? Here in the United States. Well, we got to go to China, or we got to go to Indonesia or Laos or Vietnam because they're going to make it for cheaper. We just can't compete unless we get our costs down, especially our labor. Would you agree that that's the way tariffs have been being sold within the media and everything, is to level the playing field?
Well, the way tariffs have been sold in the media is there's something very bad, and it's a primitive idea to try to even involve them in economic policy. I mean, let's be clear about the media and how it's treating Trump's agenda, no matter what it is. My caveat at the beginning was on this particular point, which is, although you could see what tariffs did before and why they were dropped ultimately, by the way, as the both national and global economy began to mature. Well, national economy began to mature, and a global architecture began to develop, in reality, that's how things operated then. The systems now are quite different than they were 120 years ago. And so applying, the behavioral models to them that applied 120 years ago is a dicey proposition at best. There are economists who have been studying these things for, forever. I honestly think you probably, and the audience probably, be better served having one, for example, Richard Wolff on than me to talk about this phenomenon. He's very thoughtful and very well educated on the related discipline, just generally to the larger discipline of economics. And but by the same token, there are some things that are obvious when you're looking at systems, and it don't require a specialized economics expertise. And that fundamental one is the one I just mentioned, that when a system is at this stage of development, a stimulus to it will produce perhaps this response. When it's at a higher or more complex stage of development, or just a different stage of development, the reaction, the response to the stimulus may well have a considerable vector. It may be quite different. And so we are kind of in uncharted territory in this particular global economy, and also this, U.S. economy, where here in 2025, I don't know what percentage it is, but a huge percentage of our manufactured goods, the bulk of them, are manufactured in Asia or elsewhere, but in China and Japan and Korea and Singapore and Bangladesh and other places. And what erecting and also the fundamental technologies. Okay, I'm going to diverse for a second. There was a General Motors automobile plant in North Tarrytown, New York, which is about a 5-iron from Ossining, if you hit it straight, where I live. And they were it was a Stanley Steamer factory when it opened, like in 1898 or something. It was there for the whole time of the development of General Motors until the 1980s, early 1990s. And then they closed it. And when they closed it, they took the entire factory apart. And there was nothing on that site at all. The steel was melted down or whatever the hell they do with it and shipped off to the four corners of the world. So if you were going to build an automobile factory in the Hudson Valley now, you would not be building it on top of the Stanley Steamer factory, built on top of the bicycle factory, built on top of the covered wagon factory, but you would be building it from scratch.
Okay.
And in terms of technology, for manufacturing and everything else, okay, artificial intelligence or not, when you have devastated the manufacturing component of your economy, if you're going to restore it, it's not going to respond in the same way to the same stimulus as before, because the conditions are not the same.
Yeah.
You would have to basically build a factory in the Hudson Valley here using materials, components, etc., from all over the world. We don't have the prior technology on site or the prior manufacturing capacity on site. We scrubbed it. And so that's one factor alone that to me is interesting. Another
before we go to that factor, just answer a question about that factor. From what you're telling me right now, it doesn't seem like, all right, and I misspoke, because the Trump administration is selling it as we have to level the playing field. They're selling the point is that we had greedy lawmakers come in that were bought off by oligarchs, and they took our whole manufacturing base and shipped it overseas for cheap labor. What I'm going to do now as Donald J. Trump is I'm going to level the playing field by inserting these tariffs, making it more of a demand to come back and open factories here to try to get back a manufacturing base. Something he also did, by the way, in his first term, and we should also maybe look at that the way it did. He did it out. But what you're saying, that's almost an impossible task to do, what we did years ago, because everything is so different nowadays. So then why try to sell that then, Don? Is that just a false thing he's trying to sell? If what you're saying is true, it won't be built in the Stanley Steamer factory that was built on top of the bike factory. It's not like that anymore. The world is different. Globalism has changed. The economy has changed. Goods and services, the way they're moved around has changed. Why sell that then if that's what's going to happen, if he's selling a false possibility?
Well, all right. First of all, what he's actually doing, it sort of betrays an innocent faith. I don't want to characterize it because I may well be wrong about this, but it's almost like a fundamentalist faith in markets and the power of the marketplace. What he's looking to do is to induce these changes by setting the market conditions for them to occur. This is actually pretty classic economic planning and policy. This is, when it's not corrupted by this interest or that interest, making the people who claim to be doing this particular thing or that with the economy do it slightly differently so it drains into their bank account. These are the kinds of things that you do, these macro changes, or it could be minor changes in little corners of the marketplace, but you change the market conditions in the belief, and there's some record, that things will respond or shake out in response to this. And so if what he's saying he's going to do, first of all, when you speak about economic policy as someone who's, ostensibly about to, make some big move with respect to economic policy, they're speaking to an audience that doesn't know shit about economics.
Yeah.
They don't know anything.
No.
And besides Congress, the American people don't know much about it either.
Yeah.
So, so explaining what I'm trying to explain here to, in mass media in like a 30-second soundbite sounds a lot like what he's saying. It sounds like that's what he's saying. Sounds like a lot of other stuff too. This is, political clap. Yeah. But
I think that's why he also used the term for what you're saying he's trying to do over here, reciprocal tariffs, which is kind of like a levying tit for tat. What you do, we'll do. The level. I mean, he's trying to sell the mentality is that we've been taken advantage of. We're no longer going to be taken advantage of again. Yeah. We're going to create the conditions for markets to thrive in a manufacturing base in the United States. They haven't been able to do that. That's what I'm going to do for you, the people, so you can pay your bills. So we're going to bring back manufacturing to the United States.
So, I've told you about when Tony Montero and I were in Cleveland in 2016, and we got a tour from this cabbie around Cleveland explaining why there weren't any protests against Trump back then. And there was like this whole line at the perimeter of the city of abandoned factories, of factories that had been, the lifeblood of the city developed with. The people lived there for generations, worked in those places, and made their livings, paid their mortgage, all of that. Yeah. Those places left these factories standing. At least it was still in 2016. The coal mining industry, excuse me, some of these others that Trump had promised to bring back, he actually did do, some considerable changes to people's lives. You notice the states that he won were the states where he promised to bring the economy back, in the Michigan and Wisconsin and all of that. He did some things improved for those people. That's why they voted for him again. Yeah. But here's the real point here. Each move that you make has impacts, some predictable, some desirable, some not. And of course, a lot of them unpredictable. This is a big, complex machine. And that's just assuming that you're the only player and the rest is response. Of course, there are multiple players. And we are now in a world of multipolarity where if one of the other players asserts something contrary to you, you can't just go occupy the presidential palace and adjust the policy to your liking. When we do whatever we do with China, China's going to do what it wants to do. And at the moment, if you want to buy a plaid shirt or a small car or a Riverkeeper hat or eyeglasses or toilet seats or whatever, if China's not selling it to you, and if they don't have a factory opening tomorrow to make them in West Virginia, you're not going to have a toilet seat or a hat or a plaid shirt. That's the reality of it. They have considerable market control here at present. Now, there's the tit for tat theory of economics, I guess, I don't know, where we're going to do something, they're going to do something, we're going to do something, they're going to do something, and I'm saying we, meaning the United States, not as if I have anything to do with it. And this whole thing is taking shape in the context of a changing international environment, there are people who are trying to sort of tea leaf what is the thing that's taking shape, this new world that's being born. Gramsci spoke about the old world refuses to die, and the new world is trying to be born. That this is the time of monsters. It's hard to tell, looking at the whole class of players, which ones are the monsters, and it's hard to tell what new world the shape of the new world is being born, that's trying to be born, and of course the one that actually will be. Here I'm talking about people have been postulating very lately that maybe what's in mind behind Trump and the people behind him, that are the motivators that put him in power and whatever, that if he's allowed to express, the intentions of this group, that what they're looking to do is not just imperial retreat, in other words, to, out of NATO and stop trying to make wars in Asia and Africa and whatever, and just come home, but rather to secure the empire in the Western Hemisphere. That we are willing to go back to a position of multipolarity if we have exclusive we, meaning their ruling class here, of the Western Hemisphere, and they would concede, control or some negotiated outcome in the rest of the world, letting China and Russia rise and develop themselves, or whatever other things are in it. Some people postulate that that's what's being negotiated right now.
Yeah.
And as good or bad or indifferent as that all may be, at the moment that this started, the model that we were facing was one where instead they were firing nuclear weapons at each other. So, if this turns out to be the other, not the war, I have no illusions about it. All we're doing is kicking the can down the road, where we're going to have to settle the question of, the people taking power. But as long as there's still a can and there's still a road, that's possible. And the course we were on before put both of them in jeopardy.
Yeah. Don, is there a way to fix this as far as the economy is concerned with everything moving forward? Because I get nervous when I hear the fact that, okay, I know that we don't make anything anymore. I know we don't fix anything anymore. I know there's a problem. We don't have the industry. You were talking about the manufacturing base, the people that bought like houses and went on vacations and put their kids through school. And this was something that was more relevant, I should say, when our parents went to school in the 30s and the 40s and the 50s and the 60s, and that dream has gone away. We can't escape the fact that technology is coming. AI might even put to rest a lot of other things that American workers do. But do you have a solution or a thought process on how we fix this moving forward? Because it seems to me like you have mentioned the fact that maybe using these old school measures that were used hundreds of years ago might not be the solution, even though Donald Trump is kind of selling it. But what's your thoughts on, and we have about 10 minutes left of you being on the show. What is your immediate thought process on how we could fix this moving forward? That is, meaning getting some type of industry or working class back in America.
Well, it's fundamentally a question of power. We had with Reagan and Patco and subsequent, and even before that, the whole deunionization of the workforce. But for decades before that, we had the whole disempowerment of the unions. It was an interesting trick that was accomplished, say, in the 50s and 60s. The unions were racially segregated and infiltrated with mafia, I guess you would call them, whatever, criminals.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, because of the perceived self-interest of those who were allowed to participate, and the need to accommodate them, the expression of their demands to some degree, it was kind of something that lifted all boats. the minimum wage kind of tailed behind the union wage, this kind of thing. I'm not saying it was the good old days by any measure. But then the unions really started to grow, but there was a complete capture of their leadership and sort of a complete, it got lost both in McCarthyism, where the union's natural ally, and it was recognized in the 20s and 30s, were the socialist countries. These were the workers, at least nominally, and in fact, much more than is granted here, workers controlled the country. The Soviet Union was organized into Soviets. The Soviet is a workers' council. That was the form of organization of the state and also of the Communist Party. And the most vociferous opponents of the Soviet Union, the most vociferous proponents of the Cold War, were the union leadership here. And so if you're facing a powerful enemy, class enemy here alone, that's a much harder fight than if you have an ally with governments, whatever their motive, with governments that at least hold themselves out to be workers' governments. So when this happened coming out of the war, that fight went on the whole time. People lifted up in the 30s and started to move towards socialism here. When you have that cut off from any help on the outside, you condemn yourself to what ultimately happened. And what happened was, first, the union leadership itself was captured. A lot of it having to do with the McCarthyist sentiment at the time. Some union leaders were too red and they were purged, not just at the top level, but within the infrastructure of the unions.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, you get to a point where the unions have these people elect Reagan, who then breaks up their unions.
Yeah.
And what did they do? They reelected the son of a bitch.
Well,
and they eulogize him after that as some great savior. Yeah. This is a problem that we have to look at when we're looking at what kind of thing are we going to allow to be built here, and what kind of things are we going to try to build ourselves. The first thing is the question of power. How do we put power back in the hands of the working class while we sit down to hash out all the rest of it? We don't want the architecture to be designed first and then, here's some power. This is what the power looks like. It fits in this little box.
Yeah.
So that's like sort of the big picture thing here.
I think that you try to say, like, and I have a hard time doing this, right? How do we sell socialism as just a workers' rights without selling overreaching power and authority? Because I think that's one of the biggest things. Evident what the ruling class has been able to do is getting people to curse communism and socialism. Not that I'm a communist or a socialist, but I understand a lot of the mechanisms that are all about workers' rights, right? Like a workers' revolution. And they've demonized it to get that, it's just too much concentrated power in one hand, less freedoms for you. That's what they've sold, and that's what people repeat.
I know. Look, here's the thing. When we talk about the workers having control, we're talking about the control being democratized.
Yeah.
This is Richard Wolff's thing too. I think he's definitely, I don't know how you get from here to there. And I have some questions or some issues with some of it, because it reminds me of some of the things that I read in the 60s and 70s that, Yugoslavia and elsewhere. I don't want to get into it, but the idea of democratizing the workplace. We spend, half our lives at work, and most of our productive time is at work, and the fruits of it don't belong to us.
Yeah. And
you know what? They don't belong to the society either. If they at least belong to the society and everyone was doing that, then the question of power becomes, how do we democratize control of the society or ownership of the society? Yeah. But we have here an even more remote problem with power. If we were somehow able to democratize society, there are many things, including our own Constitution, that stand between society, the government, and private property rights that would make it impossible, for example, to seize 200 or 300 billion each from Bezos and Musk and the other knucklehead at Facebook and whoever else. You know, if like 10 of these billionaires, if you left them all $1 billion each, we could reconstruct most of the planet. How is it? Who wrote the rules and organized things and operated things in a way that these characters get all that wealth while 9 or 10 million people a year, again this year, will die of starvation? So, you know, that is a question of power. Someone, if we democratize the instruments to do it and then do it, it's not the same as facing this beast that was assembled first, supposedly to democratize the society. And one thing is the other on its head.
We have a lot of things to work on. It's crazy because, you know, when I speak to all my truther friends, my friends in the truther community, not just conservatives, but truther community, they are like scared, you know what, of socialism or Marxism. It's been painted in a certain light, a certain way.
Yeah.
The whole populist, right? And the thing that bothers me is that I understand, okay, too much concentrated power is too much concentrated powers, but I think they're not understanding the spirits of these ideologies, which are that to support workers, not the capitalist bourgeoisie class that's going to control everything and have us constantly working for them. Seize the means of production means something different than me than it does to a lot of them. Don DeBAR, let everybody know what you're doing, where they can find you, where you've been cast away to, or whatever terminology you want to use, right? You know, where are you at? Where can we find more Don DeBAR?
I'm at let's see, I'm on Facebook under this name, you know, where the thing is.
Facebook, huh? You're a meta guy.
And I'm on Twitter at Don DeBAR. I'm on Truth Social at Don DeBAR. I'm on VK.com, which is sort of a Russian platform, Facebook style platform. Don DeBAR. Telegram, I don't know what the hell else. I have a TikTok video at a friend's site that has just hit 8 million hits.
Yeah. Is that the one where you're out in the back when it's give us your political take?
Yeah.
Where is that at? Is that on your Twitter too as well? Do you have a pin somewhere we can find that?
No.
Or
let's see here.
Put it in the private chat real quick so we can play that. But also say goodbye to the audience because you're done here, pal. We got to wrap up the show. It's 5 o'clock. Don, I love you. I look forward to seeing you. You're a mentor of mine, a friend of mine. I think you're a great resource on what's going on. You provide great perspective, not just when it comes to the news, but when it comes to life for a friend. And that's me. And I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for coming on and doing the show with me today.
Take on. Thank you, too. Thanks for all the work you do. You do great work, as you know, as we all know. And hope to see you again real soon, including get your ass up to New York.
I will. Once I handle stuff with my mom, I'm going to be up there. I want to go handle the Luigi Mangione case, and hopefully we can go do that together and go get a good slice somewhere, you know?
And my best to her, man. I hope she feels better.
Thank you, brother. I do appreciate that. Put that link in the chat, in the private chat.
Yeah, I got it in there. Go ahead.
Do that as we get you out of here. We'll get you out of here, and we'll finish up the show. Thank you, everybody, ladies and gentlemen. Don DeBAR over there.